So forgetting, remembering, ideology, politics, what do we forget about Korea and North Korea in particular? There is so much, but let me just mention three critically important facts. Bruce Cummings recently wrote that after the end of the Afghan wars, the so-called end, I should say, of the Afghan war, which was advertised as the end to forever wars, Bruce Cummings reminded us that really the forever war that has not ended yet, that is the real forever war, is the war in Korea, which for 70 years is still not declared ended. The United States, therefore, is the only nuclear-armed country in the world that is still at war and remains willfully at war with another nuclear-armed country. The United States most recently, thirdly, ignored South Korean President Moon Jae-in's request at the United Nations to end the war as a first step in the easing of tensions in the Korean Peninsula, which also exhibited the deep and widely shared desire on both sides of the border for reunification. And I should also add that, when Germany, when in 1991, we were talking about German unification, people emphasized that it should be called unification and not reunification, because the present borders of so-called unified Germany have never existed before, whereas in the case of Korea, a perfectly unified country, a country unified and a country that has been a nation for thousands of years, has been divided. When the DPRK tested missiles capable of reaching the United States a few years ago, President Trump engaged in his much advertised and in many ways quite bizarre symmetry. It could have succeeded. I think that after all, Trump had broken the mold of American politics in a number of ways. But today, but it failed for a variety of reasons. And today we are back in the old US imperialist groove. Most fundamentally, unless there is massive change in the US, or the US is forced to do it because of its own decline, we cannot expect any change in the aggressive US posture. The United States has always, in its imperialism and the imperialism of all countries, has always sought to open up economies, open them up to their own corporations and commodities, and often laid waste to the economies that they did open up in this fashion. And naturally, seeing this, fearing the prospects of this, many countries did resist. And what you are looking at in the case of North Korea is, as I said, among the most dogged resistance to imperialism that you has ever seen. So it represents some of the most determined such forces. And precisely because of that, the extent to which the DPRK is discredited as totalitarian, as autarkic, as an economic basket case led by a dynasty ruled by a cult, portraying its leaders as nuclear bad boys, etc., is simply pervasive. And to even talk about the possibility that North Korea may have some successes to report, that there may be some worthy things about that society, is to be laughed out of court. Today, our webinar will shed light on the complex and often totally opposed realities, that is to say, the realities that are totally opposed to the propaganda in the real situation in the Korea, particularly in North Korea. And today, in doing so, we are lucky beyond measure because we are joined by panelists who are among some of the most knowledgeable people on the subject. Many of them have devoted considerable parts of their already long scholarly lives to the matter. They have studied and understood Korea's history, particularly its modern history, the history of as I said, the most dogged challenge to capitalism and imperialism. So I would say prepare to be amazed, to be inspired, and certainly to be engaged. Prepare to learn the way in which independence, reunification, and peace are all deeply connected in the case of Korea.